For more than an hour today, President Donald Trump held a high-stakes phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The White House saying after the call that ceasefire negotiations with Russia will begin immediately in the Middle East. Meanwhile, the Kremlin saying that President Putin told President Trump that America and its allies must end their military and intelligence assistance to Ukraine in order to achieve a ceasefire. Scripps News international correspondent who reports regularly from Ukraine, Jason Bellini, he's now live for us at the White House. Jason, obviously, news moving a mile a minute here. What did we learn from that phone call?
Hi, Nate. Well, the world's been waiting for information on what happened in that phone call. And after a high-level meeting like this, you get what's called a readout, typically from both sides. So let's start with the Trump readout of this meeting. And the main headline here is that Trump says that they're going to begin with an energy and infrastructure ceasefire. Now, actually, let me jump now to what the Kremlin is saying on that specific notion of a ceasefire. They say that Putin has actually put into place orders for an immediate ceasefire when it comes to energy and infrastructure. So that's very significant, obviously, as a first step, potentially. This is not the full 30-day ceasefire. It doesn't have, it appears, implications immediately for what's happening on the front lines, but this could actually be to Russia's benefit, this type of ceasefire, because Ukraine, one area they've been having a lot of success lately is with hitting Russian oil refineries. We're seeing almost every day these long-range attacks from Ukrainian drones. Now, of course, Russia's been attacking Ukraine's infrastructure. That's been happening for years, and they've had enormous success in that, and it's had a major detrimental effect. But that appears that is coming first, and then they're going to be working towards a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea. I'll point out that also could be to Russia's benefit because Ukraine has developed these drones, these sea drones, that have made large parts of the Black Sea coast along Ukraine no-go zones for Russia's military, for their naval assets. Ukraine's had enormous success with taking out those assets. So those are the first things that we're seeing here, Nate.
Yeah, the Financial Times in the last couple of moments, we're trying to confirm this ourselves, get our Russian speakers looking at the statements. They're reporting that Putin has ordered Russia's military to refrain from striking Ukrainian energy infrastructure for 30 days, that Putin agreed to that on this call. Does that mean that some of the strikes by Russia will likely end, or does that just mean a possible new phase of the war?
Well, my read on that is that the long-range strikes, which are typically done with Shahed drones and ballistic and cruise missiles on energy infrastructure, and I just got back from Ukraine, and those were happening almost every night. Those apparently will cease, but again, in exchange, and we don't have a reaction yet from Ukraine to this, from President Zelenskyy, who's actually traveling right now to Finland, whether they're on board with this, but that would mean that Ukraine's long-range attacks on Russia's infrastructure would stop as well. But right now, the more critical thing is the fighting that's happening in areas like the Kursk region, where Russia's been pushing Ukrainian forces out and where the Ukrainians have been taking major casualties. As we understand it, there's no ceasefire there.
Yeah, it's interesting just reading through this preliminary translation here from the Kremlin. Sounds like there will also be a prisoner exchange as well. 175 people for 175 people, plus some seriously wounded Ukrainian service members transferred back to Ukraine. Certainly a win for Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy in some cases. But if Putin does agree to a longer-term ceasefire, a more comprehensive ceasefire, which we understand those negotiations just now in the early phases, how would that be monitored and enforced? I mean, is that something that you view as possibly enforceable from both sides?
That's a really good question. But before I answer that, there's something I'd be remiss in not mentioning. Putin has told Trump, this is according to the Kremlin, that the U.S. and its allies and other allies of Ukraine must end military and intelligence assistance to Ukraine immediately. That's one of his conditions. Whether the U.S. and its allies are amenable to that, we don't know. Is that a condition upon which the halt of attacks on energy infrastructure is contingent? We just don't know that right now. But back to your question, how would a ceasefire be enforced? Too early to tell. There's no indication yet from the readouts from the White House and from Moscow on what that would look like. All we know is that they're going to immediately, they say, immediately begin negotiations in the Middle East. Presumably that would happen in Saudi Arabia on a 30-day ceasefire, towards a 30-day ceasefire. So it sounds like Russia's demanding that there be serious conditions upon the idea of a true ceasefire, because what we have right now, this is a very, I think we can characterize it, if this all holds true, as a limited ceasefire at the moment, Nate.
Scripps News international correspondent Jason Bellini live for us at the White House. Jason, obviously a lot of readouts to get through. Thank you for coming on. I'll give you some additional time to get through those and figure out if there's anything else that's, major new in here and that certainly changes the pace of this now over 3-year-long war.